All right, let's talk inflation. You're going to hear us talking about inflation a lot on this program. We have in past shows. I'm preparing you for it. I have been preparing you for it, and it is here. And it's here in the way, it's here like a hurricane. You know when a hurricane comes in, for a day or two before, you start getting the outer bands come in. And you get rain, you get wind. That's what we're seeing now. The real storm is ahead of us. And it all comes from the Federal Reserve. I mean, the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government, through stimulus and borrowing that the Federal Reserve has to fund, has created a monster. And we've seen the money supply skyrocket, quadruple in 1 year. I show everybody that comes in my office the chart of the M1 money supply. It is that disturbing to see. You see a gradual increase in the money supply over the history of the country to $4 trillion in the beginning of 2020. And now it is almost $20 trillion. Almost 5 times the money supply. 78 to 80% of all the money in bank accounts in the system was created last year. Think about that. So if you look at this graph, this chart, it just goes straight up. It's like, holy cow, how could this even happen? And that's a picture of hyperinflation. It's hyperinflation of the money supply. And hyperinflation of the money supply moves into hyperinflation of consumer products. And we'll talk about inflation. And the dollar has hit a record low with regard to its purchasing power recently. I subscribe to the Trends Journal, which is Gerald Celenti's publication. It comes out every week. Great place to get information that you won't get on mainstream media about the economy, the markets, international affairs. Gerald Celente has been one of the top experts at forecasting trend changes. And I've been following him for some time. And this week's Trends Journal has an article by a guy named Gregory Mannarino, another guy I follow in the markets, very smart guy. And he has an article about the U.S. dollar and what it will turn into. And the title of the article is "The Value of the U.S. Dollar is Cratering." He goes on to say, every dollar that is magically created out of thin air, either in digital form, added to a digital screen, or a dollar created on a printing press, must get its value from somewhere. But what is that something? Where is it going to get its value? That something for which every new dollar gets its value is this. It robs a small percentage of value from every other already existing dollar. And that is how a newly created dollar gets its purchasing power. Now, you're not supposed to know this, because there's only so much purchasing power that a currency has. So if you have less currency, it has more purchasing power per unit than if you add to it, because when you add to it, it takes away from every other one. That's the way it gets its value. And he goes on to say that the Federal Reserve has no plans to stop creating cash, and the dilution of the dollar concerning its value will continue to plunge. And this is no accident. The Federal Reserve is on a mission to destroy the dollar in its current form, only to issue a new dollar-based fiat system. This new system will give the Federal Reserve absolute control over every single transaction, a digital trail with your name on it. The current dollar is being weaponized in the form of evaporating purchasing power to bring about a reaction, and then comes the solution. So the problem immediately is that here, the dollar in its current form is losing vast amount of its purchasing power. The reaction is going to be the population reacts to the problem and demands a solution. And the solution is the new dollar, 100% digital fiat currency. And the central bank has its goals met at that point. So basically what he's saying in this article, this is intentional. They're intentionally creating hyperinflation and destroying the dollar, because that gives them the ability to create the central bank digital dollar. And of course, asset prices in dollars are going to gain, at least when priced in dollars, right? That's called inflation. The inflation is the money supply growing. That's the real inflation. That's the definition of it. And then the symptom of it is price increases. And we're seeing it now. I mean, we talk about lumber a lot, Lumber has been up 20 out of 21 days, something stupid like that. It was down Tuesday for a little bit one day, and then went back up again. And the supply chain for lumber has collapsed because during COVID there were shutdowns of sawmills. Companies that produced lumber felt that because of the deep recession that we were going in and everybody out of work, that nobody would want. There wouldn't be demand. It was just the opposite. And lumber has been soaring. Now the problem is that that builders. I mean, look at the price of lumber. In May of last year, it was $308 for 1,000 board feet, however they calculate it. Today it's $1,238. That's a 301% increase. And it was $1,326 earlier in the week. And it just keeps going up. Which means the prices of new homes have to go up. Inflation. What if you're a contractor who went into a contract a year ago or 2 years ago to build a house for somebody for a certain price? And you don't have a provision in that contract that allows you to raise the price of the house if your materials go up. It's not usual for building materials to skyrocket out of nowhere. You usually can calculate what the cost is going to be to build a home within reason. So a lot of builders out there, because of contracts, are going to be forced to lose money on building a home for somebody because they have to honor the contract. Now, on the other hand, smart contractors always have a clause in a contract that protects them from something like this happening. But now you got a problem because now the contractor comes back to you and says, hey, your half-built house now is going to be $40,000 more because all the material's gone up. Big problem. Many people who are building their own houses have decided to stop and wait to see if prices come down. Inflation. One example. Price of plywood. Would you pay $100 for a sheet of plywood? It sounds crazy, but it's almost there right now. It's $96 or something like that. Yeah, $95.98. 3/4 inch standard plywood. March of last year, it was $37.98 for a sheet. Today it's $95.98 on average. That's a 252% price increase on one of the most used pieces of common lumber for construction. Oh, by the way, somebody who put that post up, it was flagged on Facebook for being quote-unquote misinformation. They don't want you to know that. And then when you talk inflation, talk about the insanity of these cryptocurrencies. You hear about this Dogecoin thing? I mean, I'm totally ignorant to cryptocurrencies pretty much because I just don't understand it, and I don't understand how it derives its value or why. But Dogecoin, it's went from like a penny to like 39 cents, up 8,000% in 2021 so far. Totally, collectively, Dogecoins have a total market value of roughly $50 billion. That puts it on par with the value of Dow, Kimberly-Clark. And Dogecoin doesn't even pretend to be a serious cryptocurrency. It was started as a total joke. And nobody thought it would have any value. Then Elon Musk came in and started recommending it, and then it went to the moon. And I think Dogecoin is going to be kind of like, if anybody remembers the dot-com bubble, Pets.com came public, ran up to hundreds of dollars, didn't even have a business yet. And that was the bellwether for the end of the hype of the dot-com era, and the markets crashed thereafter. I think this Dogecoin is kind of like that same moment. And I've compared it to tulip mania back in, I think, the 1700s. When people were paying the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars for a tulip bulb. These are bubbles. These are mania. Maybe next week I'll lay out the history of tulip mania. Because bubbles, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be baseball cards. It could be Cabbage Patch dolls. It could be cryptocurrency. Inflation, another example of craziness. Stock market at 34,000, given the economy, the COVID, the whole thing, inflation. This article, sales of luxury goods soar. Inflation. Louis Vuitton, the world's largest purveyor of luxury goods, saw its sales soar 30% year over year during 2021's first quarter and 8% above the same period in 2019 before the COVID virus started showing its effects. Rich people getting richer, wanting to spend their money. Big increase, 86% increase in Asian sales during this year's first 3 months. And by the way, inflation is not going to be limited to the United States. What's happening here in the United States is happening around the world. So the rich are spending money. This headline, companies are freaking out about soaring costs and are rushing to pass them on to consumers. One doesn't have to go too far. A trip to the local gas station, grocery store, or restaurant would suffice to observe how soaring commodity prices and other costs are bleeding through to the consumer. And it's only going to get worse. This week, Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, and Coca-Cola have publicly discussed lifting prices, citing rising commodity costs and manufacturing expenses. We're also seeing increases in the cost of transportation. I mean, we've never seen, at least that I can remember, such supply chain problems and such delivery problems of getting things. Anybody try to go and buy an appliance when it used to be able to get it in 2 days delivered? In some cases, it's taken months to get a refrigerator. Another reason that's frustrating builders is that they can't complete the house because they can't get the ingredients, the products, the building stuff to finish it. So imagine you finish the house, you order the appliances, and Sears tells you, is Sears still around? I don't know, whoever, Best Buy tells you that it's 4 months before you'll get your refrigerator and your stove. Another problem we have in supply chain problems is chips, computer chips that run all these things. There's not an appliance, a TV, a washing machine that doesn't use computer chips. Everything is computerized now. Cars. And the lack of something as simple as a $1 computer chip is holding up the production of so many different things. In a recent Purchasing Managers survey, the PMI, PMI is people who buy the raw materials for goods and services. So purchasing managers, they're called. We need a certain amount of copper. We need a certain amount of this. You know, the purchasing managers buy this stuff. And they're announcing that there's major cost pressures, record prices in certain things that purchasing managers buy, inflation, and supply chain pressures. Another thing we have going on is people don't want to work. 41% of companies are saying they can't get qualified employees. Wow, the lights just went off in the studio here. Hopefully it doesn't affect our broadcast. I can't read. There we go, back on. That was interesting. The percentage, there's another survey out here asking the percent of companies planning to raise prices from the Small Business Optimism Index. This indicator has surged higher and is now at historical highs. It's all in the pipeline, people. It's coming, and it's here. Home prices climb, reach a 14-year record. Housing starts in March climbed 19.4% from February. Well, mortgage rates at record lows. People wanting homes. Median price of a U.S. single-family home jumped 10.4% in February, year over year, and 1.2% from January. The median U.S. home price today is $313,000, roughly 16% higher than a year ago, from the National Association of Realtors. Again, as long as interest rates stay low and the dollar is destroyed, real estate is going to continue to remain strong. Unless you're in the commercial real estate sector. You don't want to be an investor there in strip malls, office buildings. The commercial real estate sector is a mess. And will continue to be that way. So get ready for inflation. It's here. And mainly in food. The basic, if you look at the commodities, you look at wheat, corn, meat, all these things on a wholesale level are going up dramatically. And you think that producers are going to eat the price increases? No, they're going to pass it on to the consumer. Another thing, too, because of the problems getting employment. Now, this is especially true of low-income workers. Now, you got the government paying extra money on unemployment, and you got so many people, low-income people, saying, wait a second, I'm making more on unemployment than I would make working. Why would I want to come back to work? Maybe in July, when the federal extra goes away, maybe I'll come back. But why now? I'd make more an hour being home. Well, working off the books and collecting unemployment. So this is true especially of restaurants. Restaurants are having such a difficult time to get servers and bartenders and stuff like that because it's the low-income end of the food chain of employment. And many restaurants are closing for 2 or 3 days a week just to give the existing workers they have a rest because they're working their butts off and working long hours. A McDonald's in Tampa is offering $50 for anybody who just comes for an interview. Willing to pay people to be interviewed. That's how desperate they are. So what I'm saying here is this is causing wage inflation. To get people to work, you got to pay them more now. And businesses are doing it. They have no choice. What was once a $10 an hour job is now $15. Not because the government's mandating it. Because they have to attract somebody. So that's wage inflation. And that's the way it works. Once prices start going up, then what happens is people want more money to be able to afford the same standard of living. So you just get ready for inflation. I mean, I'm telling you, it's tough. And, wages are not going to keep pace with it. They're not. And people are going to be squeezed, especially those on fixed incomes, retirees, whatnot. So if you have the ability to buy non-perishable items, do it now. The best investment you could ever make now, as far as a rate of return, is going to be food. Think about it. Your CD, if it pays 0.5%, wouldn't you be better off buying food today that's going to be 15% or more higher 6 months or a year from now? I don't know. Let's take a break. If you're on the line, stay right there. We'll get to you on the other side of the break. The phone number 732-505-1160. You're listening to The Financial Physician. Don't go away.